The massive crystalline dome of the Grand Concourse sparkled under the triple suns of Delmareth, casting prismatic rainbows across the faces of 1,000 different species. The Galactic Peace Summit, the first in 3 centuries, had drawn representatives from every corner of known space. Empires that had been locked in cold wars for generations now gathered under one roof, their ancient grievances temporarily set aside in the name of diplomacy. Ethan Cole wiped his hands on his standard-issue Earth Diplomatic Corps jumpsuit and frowned at the coffee machine. The damn thing was acting up again. As the only engineer assigned to the human delegation, his job description was officially Technical Support Specialist. But in practice, that meant he was the guy who fixed the coffee maker when Ambassador Thompson needed her hourly caffeine fix. "Come on, you glorified water heater," he muttered, adjusting a pressure valve. "The fate of interstellar relations depends on you working properly." The machine gurgled ominously in response. Ethan didn't look the part of a diplomat. At 35, with perpetually disheveled brown hair, an average build, and the kind of face that people forgot minutes after meeting him, he blended perfectly into backgrounds. His one distinguishing feature, warm hazel eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, was currently narrowed in concentration as he coaxed the ancient coffee maker back to life. The human delegation was small compared to the other species. Earth, being a relatively new addition to the galactic community, had been granted only a minor position at the summit. Their table was positioned near the back of the hall, reflecting their status in the hierarchy of interstellar politics. A sudden hush fell over the assembly. Ethan, still focused on the coffee machine, didn't notice until Ambassador Thompson jabbed him sharply in the ribs. "Cole," she hissed. "Get back to your seat. Now!" "Just one more minute, ma'am. I've almost—" "Now, Cole." Something in her tone made him look up. The entire hall had fallen silent, and all eyes were fixed on the main entrance, where a procession of tall, blue-skinned warriors was making its way toward the central platform. Their armor gleamed like polished obsidian, adorned with what appeared to be ceremonial battle scars etched in silver. Each warrior moved with perfect precision, their steps synchronized in a rhythmic cadence that somehow managed to be both beautiful and terrifying. At their center walked a figure who needed no introduction. Princess Kael'vara of the Varkari Empire. Even Ethan, who paid little attention to galactic politics, recognized her immediately. The most feared warrior in the known universe, undefeated in combat, heir to the most militaristic empire in the galaxy. Her exploits were legendary, her battle prowess the subject of terrified whispers throughout inhabited space. She was taller than the others, her sapphire skin marked with ritual scarification that told the story of her victories. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight warrior's braid that reached her waist, and her eyes, completely black except for pinpoints of white light where pupils should be, surveyed the room with cold calculation. "Holy shit," Ethan whispered, forgetting the coffee machine entirely. The Varkari delegation stopped at the center of the hall. Princess Kael'vara stepped forward, her ceremonial battle sword, a curved blade that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it, held at her side. "I stand before the assembled powers as the voice of the eternal empire of Varkari," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly through the vast chamber. "We have come to determine if peace is possible or if war is inevitable." A nervous murmur rippled through the assembly. "But first," she continued, "as tradition demands, I must issue the challenge of honor." The murmur became a collective intake of breath. Ambassador Thompson grabbed Ethan's arm. "Get back here," she whispered urgently. "This is bad." "What's happening?" Ethan asked, confused. The Varkari always issue a ritual challenge before any diplomatic negotiation. It's a formality. They choose a champion to fight their strongest warrior in a non-lethal duel. It's symbolic, meant to establish the hierarchy for the talks that follow. "So who's our champion?" Thompson looked ashen. "We weren't told to bring one. This wasn't supposed to happen until the 3rd day." On the platform, Princess Kelvara was scanning the room, her predatory gaze moving from delegation to delegation. "I seek the champion of Earth," she declared. "Let them step forward and face me in honorable combat." The human delegation froze. Ambassador Thompson looked like she might faint. "What do we do?" Ethan whispered. "I don't know," Thompson hissed back. "If we refuse the challenge, we lose all standing in the negotiations. If we accept, whoever faces her will be humiliated at best, seriously injured at worst." Kelvara's gaze finally settled on the Earth delegation. "I see the humans cower in fear," she said, her voice carrying a hint of mockery. "Perhaps they should not have been invited at all if they lack the courage to—" "I'll do it," Ethan heard someone say. It took him a moment to realize the voice was his own. Ambassador Thompson stared at him in horror. "Cole, what the hell are you doing?" "Buying us time," he muttered, then stepped forward before he could change his mind. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath as Ethan walked to the center of the floor. Standing before Princess Kelvara, he was acutely aware of how much taller she was, at least 1.5 feet, and how much more dangerous. "I am Earth's champion," he announced, hoping his voice didn't betray his terror. "I accept your challenge." A flicker of surprise crossed Kelvara's features, quickly replaced by amusement. "You?" she asked, looking him up and down. "You are the strongest warrior Earth could provide?" Someone in the audience laughed. The sound was quickly stifled. Ethan swallowed hard. "I am—" Kelvara raised her ceremonial sword. "Then prepare yourself, Earth Champion. This duel will determine the standing of your people in the coming talks." Ethan had no weapon, no armor, no combat training. As the princess raised her blade, time seemed to slow down. He saw her muscles tense, saw the gleam in her eyes, saw the expectant faces of 1,000 alien dignitaries waiting for him to be humiliated. In that moment, Ethan did the only thing he could think of. As Princess Kelvara brought her sword down in what was meant to be a ceremonial strike against his shoulder, Ethan stepped forward instead of back. He moved inside her guard, ducked under her blade, and hugged her. His arms wrapped around her armored waist, his face pressed against the cold metal of her breastplate. Ethan Cole, coffee machine repairman and accidental diplomat, gave the most feared warrior in the galaxy a warm, genuine embrace. The silence that followed was absolute. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Kelvara dropped her sword. The clang of metal against the polished floor echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. Ethan, thinking he'd made a terrible mistake, started to pull away. But before he could, a collective gasp rose from the Varkari delegation. Several of the warriors fell to their knees. "What have you done?" Kelvara whispered, her voice so low only Ethan could hear it. Her entire body had gone rigid, and for the first time, there was something other than cold calculation in her eyes. There was panic. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, stepping back and raising his hands. "I didn't mean to offend." "Silence," she commanded. Then, turning to her delegation, she barked an order in her native tongue. The Varkari warriors rose to their feet and formed a protective circle around both Kelvara and Ethan. "The human has invoked the right of life binding," one of them announced to the assembly. "The challenge is concluded. The negotiations will adjourn until tomorrow." Before Ethan could ask what was happening, he found himself being escorted, or more accurately, dragged from the hall, surrounded by Varkari warriors, with Princess Kelvara stalking ahead, her back rigid with what looked like fury. As they left, he caught a glimpse of Ambassador Thompson's face. She looked like she might either burst into tears or burst out laughing. Neither seemed like a good sign. The last thing Ethan saw before the doors closed behind him was the assembled dignitaries of 1,000 worlds, all staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to horror to grudging respect. Whatever he'd just done, it was definitely not in his job description. The Varkari royal shuttle was sleek, black, and terrifying, much like its occupants. Ethan sat stiffly on a bench, surrounded by warriors who regarded him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. Princess Kael'vara sat opposite him, her black eyes fixed on his face with the intensity of targeting lasers. "You have no idea what you've done, do you?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. Ethan cleared his throat. "I'm guessing I violated some kind of protocol?" A sound emerged from one of the warriors, something between a cough and a laugh, quickly stifled. "Protocol," Kael'vara repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, you could say that. In refusing my challenge and replacing it with a physical embrace, you have invoked an ancient Varkari ritual, the life binding, which means human, that you have proposed marriage to me, in front of the entire galactic assembly." Ethan blinked, then blinked again. "I've what?" "Among my people, to refuse combat and instead offer physical affection is the most sacred form of proposal. It signifies that you choose to bind your life to mine rather than test your strength against me." "But I didn't know that. I was trying not to get stabbed." This time, the sound of stifled laughter came from several warriors at once. Kael'vara silenced them with a glare. "Your ignorance is irrelevant," she said coldly. "The ritual has been performed in public, witnessed by representatives of every major power. It cannot be undone." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the situation. "So, what happens now?" "Now you accompany me to the Varkari Royal Palace, where you will participate in the heart trial." "The what?" "The heart trial, a series of challenges to prove your worthiness as my mate." There was something in her tone that made Ethan's blood run cold. "And if I fail these challenges?" Kael'vara's lips curved into what might have been a smile on a human. On her, it looked like a predator baring its teeth. "Then you die, of course." The warrior seated beside Ethan leaned over. "Do not worry, human," he said in a low voice. "No one has ever survived the heart trial. Your suffering will be brief." "That's not as comforting as you seem to think it is." The warrior shrugged. "It was not meant to be comforting." Ethan turned back to Kael'vara. "Look, there has to be a way to fix this. Can't we just explain that it was a misunderstanding? That on Earth, hugs are just friendly gestures." "The ritual has been witnessed," she repeated. "To back out now would dishonor both of us. I would lose standing among my people, and Earth would be seen as faithless in its commitments. So I'm just supposed to go along with this and, what, die in your heart trial?" For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across Kael'vara's face. "The alternative would be worse for your people. If you were to publicly reject the life binding now, it would be seen as a deliberate insult to the Varkari Empire. Your planet might not survive our response." Ethan stared at her. "Are you threatening Earth?" "I am stating a fact. My father, General Thax, has long advocated for a more aggressive approach to expanding our territory. Your rejection would give him the pretext he needs." Ethan fell silent, considering his options. None of them seemed good. After a moment, he asked, "How long do these heart trials usually last?" 3 lunar cycles, approximately 90 of your Earth days. "And during that time, what happens with the Peace Summit?" "It continues. I will still attend, as will you, as my betrothed." An idea began to form in Ethan's mind. 90 days. If he could stay alive that long, maybe he could find a way out of this mess, or at least buy enough time for Earth's diplomats to secure some kind of protection. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do it. I'll participate in your heart trial." Kael'vara narrowed her eyes, clearly suspicious of his quick acquiescence. "You understand that you will almost certainly die." "I understand that I don't have much choice, and hey, maybe I'll surprise you." The warrior beside him made that strange laughing sound again. "I like this human," he said. He faces death with humor. It is almost Varkari. He faces death with ignorance. Risen, Kelvara corrected. But yes, there is a certain admirable quality to his foolishness. Ethan wasn't sure if he'd just been complimented or insulted. Possibly both. So, Risen, is it? Are you part of this heart trial thing too? The warrior nodded. I am the princess's shield sworn. Where she goes, I go. I will witness your attempts to prove your worth, and I will mourn your inevitable failure with appropriate respect. Again, not comforting. Again, not meant to be. The shuttle began its descent, and through the viewport, Ethan caught his first glimpse of the Varkari royal palace. It was a massive structure of black stone and gleaming metal, its spires reaching toward the crimson sky, like the talons of some enormous beast. Unlike the elegance of the diplomatic center on Delmareth, everything about the palace spoke of power, strength, and intimidation. It was, Ethan thought, a perfect reflection of the people who had built it. As the shuttle landed on a vast platform, Kelvara fixed him with her unsettling gaze once more. From this moment forward, human, you are officially my betrothed. You will be treated with the respect that position commands, until you fail the heart trial. Make the most of the time you have left. With that ominous farewell, she rose and swept from the shuttle, her warriors following in perfect formation, all except Risen, who remained seated beside Ethan. Come, human, he said, rising and extending a hand. I will show you to your quarters. Try not to offend anyone else on the way. Some of our customs carry penalties even more severe than marriage to the princess. You know, that's the first actually helpful thing anyone said to me since this whole mess started. Risen's expression softened slightly. Perhaps you are not entirely without wisdom after all. As they disembarked, Ethan looked up at the imposing palace and tried to quiet the voice in his head, screaming that he was in way over his head. 90 days. All he had to do was survive for 90 days. How hard could it be? Ethan's quarters in the Varkari palace were surprisingly comfortable, if one could overlook the fact that they were essentially a luxurious prison cell. The room was spacious, with high ceilings and large windows that offered a view of the crimson skies and the sprawling capital city beyond. The furniture was clearly designed for someone larger than a human, but it was functional enough. His first night passed in a blur of anxiety and jet lag, or whatever the interstellar equivalent was. When morning came, announced by the harsh clanging of what sounded like ceremonial gongs, Risen arrived to escort him to breakfast. The princess requests your presence in the royal dining hall, the warrior informed him. It would be unwise to keep her waiting. Noted, Ethan said, hastily pulling on the clothes that had been provided for him. A simplified version of Varkari formal wear, adapted for human proportions. The fabric was surprisingly soft, despite its metallic appearance. Quick question. Is there anything I should know before we go in there? Any taboos I should avoid? Risen considered this. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact with General Thax. Do not touch the princess without permission. Do not refuse any food or drink offered to you, but do not consume more than the princess does. And most importantly, do not show weakness. That's a lot to remember. It is the bare minimum to avoid causing offense. I suggest you pay close attention to the princess's behavior and mirror it as best you can. Got it. Follow her lead. Risen gave him an appraising look. You are calmer than I expected. Most beings facing the heart trial are overcome with terror by now. Ethan shrugged. Oh, I'm terrified. I'm just good at compartmentalizing. Compartmentalizing? It's a human psychological technique. You put your fear in a mental box and deal with it later. Right now, I'm focusing on not making things worse than they already are. This seemed to intrigue Risen. Your species' approach to fear is unusual. The Varkari believe fear should be confronted directly and overcome through strength. Different approaches, Same goal, Ethan said, checking his reflection in a mirror and attempting to smooth down his perpetually unruly hair. We all want to master our fears. We just have different methods. Perhaps, Reeson conceded, though he didn't sound convinced. Come, we must not be late. The royal dining hall was intimidating in its grandeur. A long table of polished black stone dominated the center of the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs that resembled thrones more than dining furniture. The walls were adorned with weapons and battle flags, and what appeared to be the preserved heads of creatures Ethan couldn't begin to identify. Princess Kelvara sat at the head of the table, dressed in formal armor that seemed marginally less lethal than what she'd worn at the summit. To her right sat an older Varkari male, whose presence commanded attention even in silence. His blue skin was darker than Kelvara's, almost indigo, and crossed with so many battle scars that they formed a map of violence across his features. General Thax, Ethan presumed, remembering Reeson's warning not to make eye contact. Several other Varkari warriors were seated along the table, all watching Ethan with varying degrees of curiosity and disdain as Reeson led him to an empty chair near the princess. "The human arrives," Kelvara announced, her tone neutral. "Be seated, Ethan Cole." Ethan took his place, careful to mimic the posture of the others, back straight, hands placed palm down on the table. A servant immediately appeared to place a goblet and plate before him. "I trust your accommodations were satisfactory," Kelvara asked. "They were, thank you," Ethan replied, keeping his voice steady. "Your hospitality honors me." A flicker of surprise crossed the princess's face, quickly suppressed. Clearly, she hadn't expected him to be familiar with formal Varkari pleasantries. Ethan silently thanked the diplomatic briefing packet he'd skimmed on the journey to Delmareth. "The human knows our customs," General Thax observed, his voice a low rumble. "How convenient." "I know the basics," Ethan clarified, careful to keep his gaze on the table rather than meeting the general's eyes. "But I'm sure there's much more to learn." "Indeed there is," Kelvara said. "Beginning with the heart trial. Today, we announce the formal betrothal and the commencement of the trial." Food began to arrive, platters of what looked like meat in various stages of preparation, from nearly raw to heavily spiced, along with what might have been vegetables, though they bore little resemblance to earth varieties. "The heart trial consists of 3 phases," Kelvara continued, as servants filled their goblets with a luminescent blue liquid. "The trial of body, the trial of mind, and the trial of spirit. Each will test your worthiness as a mate, according to Varkari tradition." "And what exactly do these trials entail?" Ethan asked, cautiously, taking a sip from his goblet. The liquid tasted like a cross between mint and electricity. If electricity had a flavor, that would defeat the purpose, General Thax interjected before Kelvara could respond. "The trials must be faced without preparation. Only then can we truly assess your mettle." The way he said mettle made it clear he believed Ethan had none. "However," Kelvara added, "the first trial will begin tomorrow at dawn. You should be prepared for physical combat." Ethan nearly choked on his drink. "Combat? Against whom?" "Against me, of course," she replied, as if it were obvious. "How else would I judge your physical prowess?" "I see." Ethan took another, larger sip from his goblet. "And, just to be clear, this is a fight to the death. Or—" Several of the warriors laughed openly at this. Even Kelvara's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "No, human. If I wished to kill you, I would have done so already. The trial is meant to test your strength, endurance, and fighting spirit, not to end your life. That may come later, depending on your performance." "That's reassuring." "It should not be," General Thax said coldly. "The princess is being unusually merciful. Traditionally, the heart trial does not distinguish between failure and death." "Father," Kelvara said, a warning in her tone. The human is our guest, bound by sacred tradition. He will be treated with appropriate respect. Thax's expression darkened, but he inclined his head in acknowledgement. As you wish, daughter. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table, broken only by the sound of eating and drinking. Ethan, following his instructions, carefully matched Kelvara's pace, taking a bite when she did, sipping when she did. Tell me, human, one of the other warriors suddenly asked, what combat forms are you trained in? Ethan hesitated. Well, I took a self-defense class once. The warrior blinked.
Class?
Yeah, like a course. It lasted about 6 weeks, every Thursday evening. I learned how to break a hold and where to punch someone if they try to mug you. Silence descended on the table again, this time shocked rather than uncomfortable. You jest, another warrior said finally. Surely Earth's champion has mastered multiple combat disciplines. I'm an engineer, Ethan admitted. I fix things. The only fighting I do is with malfunctioning equipment. General Thax slammed his goblet down on the table. This is an outrage! You mean to tell me that Earth sent an untrained technician to represent them at the summit? This is an insult to the Varkari Empire. Father, Kelvara said again, her voice sharp. The human did not choose his role. He stepped forward when no other would. There is honor in that, regardless of his training. There is foolishness in it, Thax countered. Or deception. Perhaps Earth believes they can mock our traditions with impunity. Or perhaps, Ethan suggested, forgetting Reason's advice in his irritation. Earth didn't know about your traditions because no one told us about them. We weren't even supposed to be at the summit until the last minute. Our invitation arrived 3 days before the event. This revelation caused another ripple of surprise around the table. Is this true? Kelvara asked, turning to Reason. The warrior nodded reluctantly. It is possible. Princess, the Earth delegation was a late addition to the summit roster. The required briefings may have been abbreviated. You see, Ethan pressed, this whole situation is a misunderstanding. I'm not trying to insult anyone or mock your traditions. I genuinely didn't know what I was getting into. General Thax's expression remained thunderous. But something in Kelvara's face shifted, a subtle softening that might have gone unnoticed if Ethan hadn't been watching her so carefully. Ignorance does not excuse you from the consequences of your actions, she said. But her tone was less harsh than before. The life binding has been witnessed. The heart trial must proceed. I understand that, Ethan assured her. I'm not trying to back out. I'm just asking for a little cultural context. Kelvara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. After the meal, Reason will provide you with access to our historical archives. You may learn what you can about our customs before tomorrow's trial. Thank you, Princess, Ethan said, genuinely grateful. That's all I'm asking for. General Thax rose abruptly from the table. I have duties to attend to, he announced, not bothering to hide his displeasure. Princess, we will speak later. With that, he strode from the room, his boots echoing on the polished floor. You have angered him, Reason murmured to Ethan. I gathered that, Ethan replied quietly. Is that going to be a problem? Reason's expression was grave. General Thax does not forget perceived slights, and he has never approved of outsiders. Great. So I've made an enemy of the most powerful military commander in the Varkari Empire. This day just keeps getting better. On the contrary, Kelvara said, her hearing apparently much sharper than Ethan had anticipated. You have gained a measure of respect from me. Few would dare speak so directly in my father's presence. It wasn't intentional, Ethan admitted. I just reacted. Intention matters less than action among the Varkari, she told him. Remember that during the heart trial, as the meal concluded and the warriors began to disperse, Kelvara beckoned Ethan to remain. "A word of advice, human," she said, once they were relatively alone, with only Rhys standing at a discreet distance. "Do not mistake my father's disapproval for mere prejudice. He has reasons for his distrust of other species, reasons rooted in our history." "I understand," Ethan said, though he wasn't sure he did. "I'll try to be more diplomatic in the future." "No," she said, surprising him. "Be honest. Directness I can respect. Falsehood I cannot abide." She rose from her seat, towering over him. "I will see you tomorrow at dawn. Prepare yourself as best you can." With that, she left, leaving Ethan alone with Rhys and a growing sense of dread about what the next day would bring. The Varkari Historical Archives were housed in a vast, dimly lit chamber beneath the palace. Row upon row of what appeared to be crystalline data storage units lined the walls, each glowing with a soft, pulsating light. These contain the complete recorded history of the Varkari people, Rhys explained as he led Ethan through the labyrinthine space. "Over 10,000 years of knowledge." "And I've got about 12 hours to study it," Ethan muttered. "No pressure." Rhys guided him to a terminal that had been adapted for human use. "This interface has been programmed with your language. It will allow you to access the information most relevant to your situation." "Thanks," Ethan said, settling into the chair, which, like all Varkari furniture, was slightly too large for him. "I appreciate the help." Rhys hesitated, then asked, "Why did you do it?" "Do what?" "Step forward as Earth's champion. You knew you were not qualified. You must have known the risk." Ethan considered the question. "Honestly, it was impulsive. Ambassador Thompson looked terrified, and I just reacted. I thought I could buy us some time. Maybe take a symbolic defeat and let the real diplomats figure things out later." "And the embrace? Was that also impulsive?" Ethan smiled ruefully. "That was pure self-preservation. Where I come from, hugging someone is a lot less dangerous than sword fighting with them." "Yet you have inadvertently bound yourself to the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy." "Yeah, the irony isn't lost on me." Rhys studied him, with an intensity that made Ethan uncomfortable. "You are either the bravest human I have ever encountered, or the most foolish." "Probably a bit of both," Ethan admitted. "Look, I know I'm in over my head here, but I'm trying to make the best of a bad situation. I don't want to cause an interplanetary incident, and I definitely don't want to die in some ancient ritual combat. So I'm going to learn as much as I can and hope for the best." To his surprise, Rhys placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that seemed almost companionable. "Your honesty is refreshing, human. Most outsiders try to impress us with false bravado. I'm too tired for bravado, false or otherwise." This elicited what might have been a chuckle from the warrior. "I will leave you to your studies. A servant will bring food and drink. If you have questions, press this button." He indicated a small red crystal embedded in the terminal. "You'll be available all night?" "I am the princess's shield sworn. I do not sleep when she may have need of me." With that, Rhys departed, leaving Ethan alone with 10,000 years of Varkari history and a deadline that was approaching far too quickly. Sighing, he turned to the terminal and began to search for information about the heart trial. What he found was not encouraging. The heart trial, it turned out, was an ancient tradition dating back to the earliest days of the Varkari Empire. Originally, it had been a series of tests administered to potential mates of the royal line, designed to ensure that only the strongest, most intelligent, and most spiritually attuned individuals would join the ruling family. Over time, as the Varkari became more militaristic, the trials had evolved into increasingly brutal challenges. The survival rate, according to the historical records, was less than 10%. The trial of body, which Ethan would face tomorrow, traditionally involved combat with the royal family member in question. Victory was not expected. Indeed, it would be seen as an insult to the royals' prowess. Instead, the challenger was judged on their form, endurance, courage, and ability to withstand pain. "Great," Ethan muttered. "So I'm supposed to lose gracefully and take a beating while I'm at it." The trial of mind was more variable, often tailored to the specific royal family member. It could involve strategic games, diplomatic scenarios, or tests of knowledge. Failure here meant immediate disqualification, and historically, death. The trial of spirit was the most mysterious of all. The records referred to it as the unveiling of the true self and the final judgment of worthiness. What exactly that entailed was left frustratingly vague. As the hours passed, Ethan dug deeper, looking not just at the heart trial itself, but at Varkari culture more broadly. He learned about their warrior ethos, their complex honor code, their belief in strength as the ultimate virtue. But he also found references to older traditions, before the rise of General Thax and the military hardliners, when the Varkari had valued poetry, music, and philosophical discourse alongside martial prowess. Most interestingly, he discovered that the life-binding ritual, the one he'd accidentally invoked with his hug, had originated not as a marriage proposal, but as a peace offering. In ancient times, enemies would embrace to show they chose alliance over conflict. Only later had it evolved into a romantic gesture. "So I basically offered her a peace treaty, and everyone interpreted it as a marriage proposal," Ethan mused. "That's actually kind of fascinating." He continued reading, absorbing as much as he could about Varkari customs, history, and psychology. As dawn approached, he found himself focusing less on the heart trial and more on understanding the people themselves, particularly Princess Kael'vara and General Thax. The general, he learned, had risen to power during a period of external threats to the Varkari Empire. His military campaigns had expanded their territory and secured their borders, but at the cost of increased isolation from other species. Under his influence, the once diverse Varkari diplomatic corps had been reduced to a military attaché, and cultural exchanges had all but ceased. Kael'vara, as his adopted daughter and heir, had been raised in this militaristic environment. Her combat prowess was legendary even among the Varkari, and she had never been defeated in formal battle. Yet, there were hints in the more recent records of tension between her and her father. Subtle disagreements over policy, small acts of independence that suggested she might not share his isolationist views entirely. As Ethan finally pushed away from the terminal, his eyes burning with fatigue, he felt he understood the situation a little better. Not enough to navigate it safely, perhaps, but enough to have a glimmer of an idea. If the Varkari valued strength above all else, then perhaps he needed to show them a different kind of strength, one they might not recognize, but might come to respect. It was a long shot, but it was the only strategy he had. The combat arena was a circular pit surrounded by tiered seating, reminiscent of ancient Roman colosseums on Earth. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across the sand, Ethan stood at one entrance, trying to control his racing heart. Rhys had provided him with lightweight training armor, still too heavy by human standards, but better than nothing. He'd also been given a choice of weapons, from which he'd selected a simple staff. It was the only option he had any hope of using, without injuring himself more than his opponent. "Remember," Rhys told him, as they waited for the signal to enter, "the princess does not expect you to win. She expects you to fight with honor and endurance. Do not surrender too quickly, but do not foolishly prolong your suffering either." "Got it. Lose with dignity." "Precisely." A horn sounded, deep and resonant, and Rhys nodded. "It is time. May your ancestors guide your blade, Ethan Cole."
"Thanks, I think—"
Ethan stepped into the arena, blinking in the harsh morning light. The stands were filled with Varkari warriors and nobles, their blue faces impassive as they watched him. At the highest point sat General Thax, his expression cold and evaluating. From the opposite entrance emerged Princess Kelvara. She wore minimal armor, clearly confident in her abilities, and carried a training sword that looked no less lethal for its blunted edge. Her silver hair was bound tightly, and her black eyes fixed on Ethan with predatory focus. They met in the center of the arena, where a white circle had been drawn in the sand. "The trial of body begins," announced a herald from the stands. "Princess Kelvara will test the physical worthiness of the human, Ethan Cole. The trial ends when one combatant yields, is rendered unconscious, or steps outside the circle." Kelvara raised her sword in salute. Ethan awkwardly mimicked the gesture with his staff. "Begin," the herald cried. Kelvara moved so quickly that Ethan barely saw her attack. One moment she was standing still. The next, her sword was slashing toward his midsection. Pure instinct made him bring the staff up to block, but the force of her blow sent him staggering backward. "Not bad," she said, sounding mildly surprised. "Your reflexes are quick, at least." "Thanks," Ethan gasped, trying to regain his balance. "I play a lot of video games." Her brow furrowed in confusion, but she didn't pause her attack. She came at him again, this time with a series of rapid strikes that he could barely track, let alone counter. He managed to block or dodge most of them, but a few connected, sending shocks of pain through his arms and shoulders. Within minutes, he was breathing hard, his muscles burning with exertion. Kelvara, meanwhile, hadn't even broken a sweat. "You're holding back," he accused during a brief respite. "Of course I am," she replied. "If I fought at full strength, you would be dead already." Fair point. They circled each other, Ethan trying to catch his breath while looking for any opening in her defense. There was none. Her form was perfect, her guard impenetrable. As she launched another attack, Ethan decided to try something different. Instead of attempting to block or counter, a losing strategy against someone so much stronger and more skilled, he focused on evasion. He ducked, weaved, and rolled, using his smaller size and lighter weight to stay just out of reach of her blade. This seemed to intrigue her. "You adapt," she observed. "Good." "I'm an engineer," he replied between gasping breaths. "Adaptation is what we do." For several more minutes, they continued this dance, Kelvara attacking with controlled precision, Ethan evading by increasingly desperate means. The crowd watched in silence, occasionally murmuring when he managed a particularly creative dodge. But Ethan was tiring quickly. His lungs burned, his legs trembled, and his reactions were slowing. It was only a matter of time before pain exploded across his ribs as her sword connected solidly for the first time. He stumbled, nearly falling, and barely managed to bring his staff up to block her follow-up strike. The impact sent shockwaves through his already aching arms. "Yield," Kelvara suggested, not unkindly. "You have shown sufficient courage." Ethan considered it. He was clearly outmatched, and continuing would only result in more pain. But something, pride, stubbornness, or perhaps the memory of Earth's precarious diplomatic position, made him shake his head. "Not yet," he gasped. Her eyes narrowed. "Very well." The next blow caught him across the shoulder, sending him to his knees. His staff clattered to the ground beside him. Kelvara stood over him, sword raised for the finishing strike. And in that moment, Ethan had an epiphany. He couldn't win this fight. Not in the traditional sense. But maybe he didn't need to. Maybe there was another way to show strength. As Kelvara's sword descended, Ethan did the last thing anyone expected. He smiled at her. Not a grimace of pain or a rictus of fear, but a genuine, warm smile. "Thank you," he said. The sword stopped an inch from his head. Kelvara's expression shifted from focused determination to confusion. "What did you say?" "I said thank you. For the lesson. I've learned a lot about Varkari combat techniques today." The arena had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. You are grateful for being defeated? Knowledge is never a defeat, Ethan replied, quoting from one of the philosophical texts he'd read the night before. Only ignorance truly conquers. Kael'vara's eyes widened in recognition of the quote. For a long moment, she stood frozen, sword still raised. Then, slowly, she lowered it. You studied our ancient texts, she said, her voice too low for the audience to hear. I did. I wanted to understand your people better. Another long pause. Then, to the shock of everyone present, including Ethan, Princess Kael'vara extended her hand to him. Rise, she commanded, loud enough for all to hear. You have endured the trial of body with unexpected wisdom. Ethan took her hand and allowed her to pull him to his feet. His body protested every movement, but he managed to stand straight, facing her. The human has not yielded, has not been rendered unconscious, and has not left the circle, she announced to the crowd. The trial of body is complete. A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. From his elevated position, General Thax leaned forward, his expression thunderous. This is unprecedented, he called out. The human clearly lost the combat. The conditions for ending the trial have not been met, Kael'vara countered. And as the challenge party, it is my right to determine when the trial is complete. Thax's jaw clenched, but he did not argue further. With a curt nod, he rose and left the stands, his displeasure evident in every line of his body. As the crowd began to disperse, Kael'vara turned back to Ethan, her voice once again too low for others to hear. That was unexpected, she said. You fought not with your body, but with your mind. I used the only weapons I had, Ethan replied, wincing as he tried to take a deep breath. He was fairly certain at least one of his ribs was cracked. Yes, she agreed, studying him with new interest. Perhaps you are not as defenseless as you appear. Before he could respond, she turned and strode from the arena, leaving him swaying on his feet, simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. Risen appeared at his side, supporting him as his legs finally gave out. What did you do? The warrior asked, sounding both impressed and concerned. The princess has never ended a combat trial before its natural conclusion. I changed the rules, Ethan said, then passed out. Ethan woke in his quarters, his body wrapped in healing bandages that glowed with a soft blue light. Risen sat nearby, looking remarkably like a bodyguard from an Earth crime drama. How long was I out? Ethan asked, his voice raspy. 6 hours, Risen replied. The medical technician said you sustained 3 broken ribs, extensive muscle damage, and a mild concussion. The bandages should accelerate your healing, but you will be in pain for several days. Great, just in time for the next trial, I'm sure. Actually, the princess has postponed the trial of mind until you have recovered. She says it would be unfair to test your intellect while you are impaired by injury. Ethan blinked in surprise. That's unexpectedly considerate. The princess is not without honor, Risen said, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. She does not seek an unfair advantage. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise, Ethan assured him. I'm just surprised, given what I've read about the heart trial's history. Risen's expression softened slightly. The princess is not like her predecessors in many ways. Her father believes this makes her weak. Others... He trailed off, seemingly uncomfortable with what he had been about to say. Others think it makes her stronger, Ethan finished for him. Risen nodded cautiously. There are those who remember the old ways, before General Thax rose to power, when the Varkari were known not just for their strength in battle, but for their wisdom, their art, their philosophy. You're one of them, aren't you? That's why you've been helping me. The warrior's expression became guarded. I serve the princess. My personal views are irrelevant. Of course, Ethan said, deciding not to push further. So, when do I get to leave this bed? The technicians will return in a few hours to assess your progress. Until then, you are to rest." Ethan sighed and settled back against the pillows. "Not much else I can do, I suppose." Risen rose. "I must report to the princess. A servant will be stationed outside if you require anything." As he reached the door, Ethan called after him. "Risen, thank you for everything." The warrior paused, then inclined his head slightly before departing. Left alone, Ethan stared up at the ceiling, replaying the events of the combat trial in his mind. He'd survived, barely, but he knew the next trials would be even more challenging. He needed a strategy, something more than just stumbling through and hoping for the best. His thoughts were interrupted by the door opening again. To his surprise, Princess Kael'vara herself entered, dressed not in armor, but in what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire. "Princess," he said, attempting to sit up and immediately regretting it, as pain lanced through his chest. "Remain still," she commanded, approaching his bedside. "Your injuries require rest." "Is everything all right?" he asked, puzzled by her unexpected visit. "I came to assess your condition," she said, her tone neutral. "The trial of mind requires full cognitive function. It would be inappropriate to proceed until you have recovered." "So I've been told. Thank you for the consideration." She studied him for a moment, her black eyes unreadable. "Your performance in the trial of body was unusual. I've been hearing that a lot lately. You quoted philosopher General Vexlar. His writings have not been part of official Varkari education for 3 generations. I found his work in the archives. It resonated with me." Kael'vara tilted her head slightly. "Why?" "Because he understood that true strength isn't just about physical power or military might. It's about wisdom, adaptability, emotional resilience, things humans tend to value." "Emotions are weakness," she said, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "Are they? Or are they just a different kind of strength, one that's harder to measure in combat, but no less valuable?" She didn't respond immediately, her gaze shifting to the window and the crimson sky beyond. "You speak like a philosopher, not a warrior. On Earth, sometimes we can be both." This seemed to intrigue her. "Tell me about Earth. Not its military capabilities or political structures. I have read those reports. Tell me about its people." It was an unexpected request, but Ethan seized the opportunity. For the next hour, he told her about Earth, its diverse cultures, its art and music, its contradictions and complexities. He told her about human resilience, about communities coming together after disasters, about the capacity for both tremendous cruelty and extraordinary kindness. Kael'vara listened with surprising attentiveness, occasionally asking questions that revealed a genuine curiosity about human nature. "Your species is puzzling," she said finally. "You lack physical strength compared to many races, yet you have survived and thrived. You wage war against yourselves constantly, yet you speak of peace as your highest ideal. You claim to value life, yet you risk it for abstract concepts like love and freedom." "We contain multitudes," Ethan said with a small smile. "It's what makes us human." "Perhaps," she conceded. Then, abruptly changing the subject. "The Peace Summit continues tomorrow. I must attend. You will accompany me once the medical technicians clear you for travel." "I will?" "Yes, as my betrothed. Your presence is expected at diplomatic functions." "Right, the betrothal. I almost forgot about that part." Something like amusement flickered across her features. Few forget being bound to the heir of the Varkari Empire. "Well, I've had a lot on my mind. Near-death experiences tend to be distracting." This time, her lips definitely curved upward. "Rest, Ethan Cole. We will speak again tomorrow." As she left, Ethan found himself smiling despite his pain. It wasn't much, but it felt like progress. Princess Kael'vara, the most feared warrior in the galaxy, had almost smiled at him. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't going to die in this heart trial after all. The Peace Summit reconvened in the Grand Hall of Delmareth, the same place where Ethan's ordeal had begun just days earlier. This time, however, he entered not as an anonymous technician, but as the official betrothed of Princess Kael'vara, walking beside her at the head of the Varkari delegation. The reaction from the assembled dignitaries was a mixture of shock, curiosity, and in some cases, thinly veiled amusement. Ambassador Thompson, when she caught sight of him, looked like she might faint. "Ambassador," Ethan greeted her as the Varkari delegation took their seats. "Good to see you again."
Cole, she hissed. What the hell is going on? We've been told you're engaged to the princess? That you're participating in some kind of trial? The diplomatic corps is in an uproar.
"It's a long story," he said. "The short version is, I accidentally proposed to her, according to Varkari custom. And now, I have to prove my worthiness through a series of potentially lethal challenges." Thompson stared at him. "You're joking."
I wish I was.
Before she could respond, General Thax approached, his imposing figure causing a hush to fall over the nearby delegates. "Ambassador Thompson," he said, his deep voice carrying an undercurrent of threat. "I trust Earth's delegation is prepared to discuss the terms of the new territorial agreements." Thompson straightened, visibly summoning her diplomatic poise. "Of course, General. Earth is always open to peaceful negotiation." "Good, because the terms have changed since our last communication." Ethan tensed, sensing the threat beneath the general's formal language. "Changed how, exactly?" Thompson asked carefully. "In light of recent developments," Thax said, his gaze flicking briefly to Ethan. "The Varkari Empire requires additional security guarantees, specifically, the demilitarization of Earth's outer colonies and unrestricted access to your Jumpgate network." Thompson's expression remained neutral, but Ethan could see the alarm in her eyes. "Those are significant changes, General. They would require consultation with Earth's government." "Of course," Thax agreed smoothly. "Take all the time you need. The Varkari are patient." His tone made it clear that patience had limits. As he moved away to speak with other delegates, Thompson turned to Ethan, her voice urgent but low. "Cole, what the hell did you do? The original agreement was for limited trade rights and a non-aggression pact. Now they're basically demanding we hand over control of our entire defensive infrastructure." "It's not about what I did," Ethan said, the pieces suddenly falling into place. "It's about what the general is planning. He's using my betrothal to Kael'vara as leverage. If I fail the heart trial, it'll be seen as Earth rejecting the Varkari, giving him the pretext he needs for aggression." "And if you succeed?" "I don't think he's planning on that possibility." The summit session began before they could discuss further, with representatives from various species taking turns to present their positions on interstellar trade, territorial rights, and security arrangements. Throughout the proceedings, Ethan observed the dynamics between the different delegations. The Varkari, under General Thax's leadership, took a consistently hard line, pushing for concessions from smaller powers while offering little in return. Other major powers, the Trilaxian Confederation, the Mithrai Collective, the Hazak Dominion, countered with their own demands, creating a complex web of competing interests. Princess Kael'vara, seated beside her father, said little, but Ethan noticed her subtle reactions to each proposal, a slight narrowing of the eyes here, a barely perceptible shift in posture there. She was not entirely aligned with her father's positions. He realized. There was nuance to her views that Thax either didn't share or chose to ignore. When the session broke for a recess, Ethan found himself surrounded by curious delegates from various species, all eager to meet the human who had somehow become betrothed to the fearsome Varkari princess. "Is it true you defeated her in combat?" asked a small, feathered being whose species Ethan couldn't identify. "No, that's not..." I heard he used a secret Earth weapon, another delegate whispered loudly. Actually, They say he's the deadliest assassin Earth has produced, a third chimed in. Ethan sighed, resigning himself to the rumors. Before he could attempt to correct them, Risen appeared at his side. The princess requests your presence, the warrior said formally, though there was a hint of amusement in his eyes as he observed the gossiping delegates. Grateful for the rescue. Ethan followed Risen to a small antechamber where Kael'vara waited, reviewing documents on a holographic display. You summoned me, princess? Ethan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. She dismissed the display with a gesture. The rumors are spreading faster than anticipated. Yeah, apparently I'm everything from a master assassin to a secret weapon. The truth is a lot less exciting. Is it? She asked, studying him. An untrained human survives the trial of body against the heir to the Varkari throne. That is unprecedented. I got lucky. No, she said firmly. Luck had nothing to do with it. You strategized, you adapted. You used psychological tactics rather than physical force. She stepped closer, her height forcing him to look up to meet her gaze. My father believes you are part of an Earth plot to infiltrate the Varkari power structure. Ethan snorted. If we were that clever, we wouldn't need to attend peace summits in the first place. I am inclined to agree, she said, surprising him. Which is why I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. The trial of mind begins tomorrow. Traditionally, it would test your strategic abilities through combat simulations or tactical puzzles. But I am curious about your human perspective. So I propose an alternative. What kind of alternative? You will accompany me to negotiations with the Trilaxian Confederation. You will observe, advise me privately, and demonstrate your diplomatic acumen. This will be your trial of mind. Ethan considered this. On one hand, it seemed less physically dangerous than whatever the traditional trial might have been. On the other hand, interstellar diplomacy was far outside his expertise. Why? He asked finally. Why change the trial for me? Kael'vara was silent for a moment, as if debating how much to reveal. My father's vision for the Varkari Empire is one of isolation and military dominance. For generations, we have followed this path. But I have doubts. About whether strength alone is sufficient for survival in a changing galaxy. The old texts speak of balance, of wisdom and force working in harmony. If Earth has found another kind of strength, as you claim, I wish to understand it. It was the most personal thing she had shared with him, and Ethan recognized the significance of her trust. I accept your proposition, he said. Though I should warn you, I'm an engineer, not a diplomat. My expertise is fixing things, not negotiating treaties. Perhaps that is precisely what these negotiations need, she replied. Someone who sees problems as systems to be repaired, rather than battles to be won. Before Ethan could respond, the door opened, and General Thax entered, his expression darkening at the sight of them in close conversation. Daughter, he said coldly, the Trilaxian ambassador awaits your response to his proposal. I will return shortly. Father, she replied, her tone neutral. I was just discussing tomorrow's trial of mind with my betrothed. Thax's gaze shifted to Ethan, contempt evident in every line of his face. Do not forget your duty to the Empire, Kael'vara. This arrangement is temporary. Once the human fails the heart trial, we will proceed with our original plans. Of course, Father, she said. But Ethan noticed a new tension in her posture. After Thax left, Ethan turned to her. What original plans was he talking about? Kael'vara's expression became guarded. It is not your concern. If it involves Earth, it very much is my concern. She regarded him for a long moment, then said, My father believes the galaxy is on the brink of a new conflict. He wishes to ensure the Varkari Empire is appropriately positioned when it begins. The implications were clear. He's planning for war. The Varkari are always planning for war. Ethan Cole, it is our way. And is it your way too? The question seemed to catch her off guard. I am Varkari, she said. But the response sounded automatic, rehearsed. That's not what I asked. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, Ethan thought he glimpsed uncertainty in her gaze, a crack in the formidable armor of the warrior princess. But the moment passed, and her expression hardened once more. Return to the Earth delegation. I will send for you when the trial of mine begins. As Ethan left the antechamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just glimpsed something few were allowed to see. The person behind the princess, the individual beneath the air, and that person, he suspected, was far more complex than the warrior the galaxy feared. The Tralaxian Confederation's diplomatic vessel was a marvel of organic technology, a living ship that seemed to breathe and pulse around them, as Ethan accompanied Princess Kael'vara and a small Varkari delegation to the negotiations. Remember, Risen murmured to him as they waited in an antechamber that looked suspiciously like the inside of a massive artery. This is your trial of mind. The princess will be evaluating your strategic thinking, your adaptability, and your understanding of complex diplomatic situations. No pressure, Ethan muttered. Just interstellar peace at stake. Indeed, Risen agreed, missing or ignoring the sarcasm. The Tralaxians are ancient rivals of the Varkari. These negotiations will determine territorial rights in the Corellian Nebula for the next century. Before Ethan could ask for more background, a section of the wall rippled and parted, revealing a Tralaxian diplomat, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin and 4 upper limbs that moved with hypnotic grace. The council will receive you now, the diplomat announced in a melodious voice. Kael'vara nodded regally and led their party into the council chamber, a vast, dome-shaped room where the walls shifted with patterns of light that seemed to respond to the emotions of those present. At the center stood a circular table, around which sat 5 senior Tralaxian representatives. As the negotiations began, Ethan observed in silence, trying to follow the complex discussions of territorial boundaries, resource rights, and security arrangements. The Tralaxians spoke in flowing, metaphor-laden language that contrasted sharply with the direct, martial terminology of the Varkari. After an hour of what appeared to be polite but firm disagreement, the senior Tralaxian counselor, a being whose skin shimmered with patterns of authority, addressed Kael'vara directly. Princess of the Varkari, we have circled these issues like stellar bodies in orbit, never drawing closer to resolution. Perhaps a new perspective would illuminate our path. We understand your human companion is bound to you by sacred right. Might he offer insights from Earth's experience? All eyes turned to Ethan. Kael'vara hesitated, then nodded. My betrothed may speak, if he wishes. Put on the spot, Ethan cleared his throat. I'm not a diplomat, he began honestly. But as an engineer, I've found that when 2 systems seem incompatible, the solution often lies not in changing either system fundamentally, but in creating an interface between them that allows each to function according to its own principles, while still working together. The Tralaxians exchanged glances, their skin patterns shifting in what might have been interest. Elaborate human, the senior counselor requested, warming to his subject. Ethan continued. From what I understand, the Varkari need secure borders and clear territorial boundaries, defined space that they control absolutely. The Tralaxians, whose ships and technology are adaptive and organic, need flexibility and permeable zones that allow for natural expansion and contraction based on your biological cycles. He turned to a star map displayed on the table. What if, instead of a fixed boundary, you established a graduated transition zone? The core areas would be exclusively controlled by each power, but the border regions would operate under shared jurisdiction, with different rules at different times, synchronized with Trilaxian biological cycles. The chamber fell silent as both delegations considered this proposal. Unprecedented, one of the Varkari warriors muttered. But not without merit, Kael'vara said, studying the map thoughtfully. A flexible boundary that remains predictable and regulated would satisfy our security concerns, while accommodating Trilaxian biological imperatives. The senior Trilaxian counselor's skin rippled with patterns of approval. The human thinks in harmonies, not divisions. This is refreshing. For the next several hours, the negotiations continued with new energy, focusing on the practical implementation of Ethan's concept. By the time they concluded, a preliminary agreement had been drafted, the first meaningful progress in negotiations that had been deadlocked for decades. As they returned to the Varkari shuttle, Kael'vara was silent, her expression unreadable. It wasn't until they were alone in the privacy of her personal quarters aboard the ship that she spoke. "You approach the problem like a technician, not a warrior or a diplomat," she observed. "You saw a system to be optimized, not a conflict to be won or a compromise to be negotiated." "That's how I'm trained to think," Ethan admitted. "Find the underlying needs of each component, then design an interface that meets those needs efficiently. It is not how the Varkari approach problems." "Did it work?" "Yes," she acknowledged. "The Trilaxians have agreed to terms they have rejected for 3 generations. My father will be surprised." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Kael'vara's expression hardened slightly. "My father's approval is not the metric by which the trial of mind is judged. My assessment alone determines the outcome." "And what is your assessment?" She studied him for a long moment, her black eyes inscrutable. "You have passed the trial of mind, Ethan Cole. Your strategy was unconventional but effective. You demonstrated adaptability, insight, and a form of strength I had not previously considered valuable." Relief washed over him. "Thank you, Princess. However," she continued, her tone growing serious, "the final trial, the trial of spirit, will not be so easily navigated. It begins tomorrow, and it will test not your body or your mind, but the essence of who you are." "What does that mean, exactly?" "It means," she said softly, "that tomorrow you will face your true self, and few beings, of any species, are prepared for that confrontation." With those ominous words, she dismissed him, leaving Ethan to wonder what new challenge awaited him in this final, mysterious trial. The night before the trial of spirit, Ethan couldn't sleep. He paced his quarters, running through scenarios in his mind, trying to prepare for a test he couldn't begin to understand. What did it mean to face your true self? Was it a psychological evaluation? A mind probe? Some kind of Varkari vision quest? A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Opening it, he found Risen standing outside, looking uncharacteristically troubled. "May I enter?" the warrior asked. "Of course," Ethan said, stepping aside. "Is everything all right?" Risen closed the door behind him and spoke in a low voice. "I come not as the princess's shield sworn, but as someone concerned for your well-being." "That doesn't sound good." "The trial of spirit is not like the others," Risen explained. "It is ancient, predating even the militarization of our society. It uses technology that was old when my ancestors were young. Technology that touches the mind directly." "You're talking about some kind of neural interface?" "More than that. The ancestral mirror, as we call it, reveals the truth of a being's nature, their deepest fears, their hidden desires, their true motivations. Nothing can be hidden from it, not even from oneself." Ethan swallowed hard. "And what happens if the mirror doesn't like what it sees?" Risen's expression grew grim. "The mirror does not judge, it merely reveals. But those who witness what it reveals, including the subject themselves, may not be prepared for the truth it exposes. Has anyone ever survived this trial? Few. Most cannot bear to confront their true nature. They either go mad or... He trailed off. Or what? Or they choose to end their suffering. Reeson finished quietly. Ethan sat heavily on the edge of his bed. Great. So tomorrow I either go insane or commit suicide. Fantastic options. There is a third possibility, Reeson said hesitantly. One so rare it has occurred only twice in our recorded history. I'm all ears. If a being is truly at peace with themselves, if their outer actions align perfectly with their inner nature, then the mirror simply reflects back what is already known. No secrets, no hidden shames, no buried traumas. And you think I might be one of these rare, perfectly self-actualized individuals? Ethan asked skeptically. No, Reeson admitted. But I think you may be more prepared than most. You have shown a remarkable ability to adapt, to think beyond conventional boundaries, and most importantly, you seem to know who you are. I'm a coffee machine repairman who got way in over his head, Ethan said with a rueful laugh. Are you? Reeson challenged. Or is there more to you than even you recognize? The question hung in the air between them, unsettling in its implications. Why are you telling me this? Ethan asked finally. Aren't you supposed to be loyal to the princess and the Varkari Empire? Reeson was silent for a long moment. I am loyal, he said at last. But loyalty does not always mean blind obedience. The princess, she is not like her father. She questions. She doubts. And since you arrived, those questions have grown louder. What are you saying? I am saying that the outcome of your trial of spirit may determine more than just your fate. Ethan Cole. It may influence the future direction of the Varkari Empire itself. With that sobering thought, Reeson bid him good night, leaving Ethan alone with his anxiety and a growing sense that there were currents moving beneath the surface of this situation that he had only begun to perceive. The chamber of reflection, where the trial of spirit would take place, was deep beneath the Varkari Palace, a cavernous space carved from the living rock of the planet itself. Ancient symbols covered the walls, glowing with a soft, pulsating light that seemed to emanate from within the stone rather than being projected onto it. At the center of the chamber stood the ancestral mirror, a towering arch of what appeared to be liquid metal, its surface rippling and shifting like mercury, but somehow contained within an invisible boundary. The light from the walls reflected off its surface, creating patterns that seemed to move with purpose, as if the mirror itself were alive and watching. Princess Kael'vara stood before it, dressed not in her usual armor, but in ceremonial robes of deep indigo. Beside her was General Thax, his expression grim, and a circle of Varkari elders, ancient warriors whose bodies bore the scars of countless battles. As Ethan entered, escorted by Reeson, all eyes turned to him. The human comes to face the trial of spirit, announced one of the elders, her voice cracking with age. Let him approach the mirror of truth. Ethan stepped forward, his heart hammering in his chest. Up close, the mirror was even more unsettling. Its surface seemed to draw the eye inward, creating a sense of infinite depth. The trial of spirit is the final and most sacred test of the heart trial, Kael'vara explained, her voice formal, but with an undercurrent of tension that only Ethan seemed to notice. It will reveal your true nature, your deepest self. There is no strategy, no technique that can influence the outcome. The mirror sees all. What exactly am I supposed to do? Ethan asked, his mouth dry. Simply touch the surface, she replied. The mirror will do the rest. General Thax stepped forward. Be warned, human. Many have been driven mad by what they saw within. The mirror does not lie, and it does not spare the fragile from the truth. There was something in his tone, a hint of anticipation, perhaps even eagerness, that made Ethan uneasy. It was almost as if the general wanted him to fail, to break under the pressure of whatever revelation awaited him. "I understand," Ethan said, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "I'm ready." Kael'vara caught his eye briefly. Was that concern in her gaze? Before he could be sure, she stepped back, joining the circle of observers. Taking a deep breath, Ethan approached the mirror. Its surface rippled more violently as he drew near, as if responding to his presence. He raised his hand, hesitated for a heartbeat, then pressed his palm against the liquid metal. The sensation was electric, a jolt that shot up his arm and directly into his brain. The chamber around him dissolved, replaced by swirling darkness that gradually coalesced into his childhood home. Ethan found himself standing in the living room of the small apartment where he'd grown up. His mother sat at the kitchen table, her face tired, but smiling as she helped a young Ethan with his homework. "You see, honey, the system is just like a puzzle. Find how the pieces fit together, and you can fix anything." The scene shifted. College dorm rooms, engineering labs, his first job at a tech startup, moments of triumph and failure, learning and growth, all centered around the same theme: understanding systems, finding elegant solutions, fixing what was broken. Then came the military recruitment, the specialized training, the classified operations. Ethan stiffened as memories he'd almost forgotten, or had deliberately suppressed, unfolded before him. Himself in uniform, not as a regular soldier, but as part of a specialized unit. Psychological operations, conflict de-escalation, the empathy division. He remembered now. Before becoming a diplomatic corps technician, he'd been part of an experimental program. Soldiers trained not to fight, but to understand, to connect, to find the human element that could diffuse even the most volatile situations. "Your greatest weapon is not your firearm," his commander had told them. "It's your ability to see the person behind the enemy, to find the fear behind the anger, to offer connection instead of conflict." The memories cascaded faster. Missions in conflict zones on Earth, using empathy and psychological insight to prevent violence, to open dialogues, to find solutions where others saw only threats. And then, the final mission, the one that had led to his quiet reassignment as a technician in the diplomatic corps. He'd been sent to negotiate with a terrorist cell holding hostages. Standard procedure would have been to gather intelligence for a tactical strike. Instead, Ethan had done the unthinkable. He'd surrendered his weapon, walked into their stronghold unarmed, and hugged the leader of the cell. The man, so long defined by violence and hate, had broken down. The situation had been resolved without bloodshed, but military command had been horrified by the risk he'd taken, by the unorthodox approach that violated every protocol. So they'd buried him in the bureaucracy, keeping his psychological skills on hand, but safely contained in a role where he couldn't disrupt operations with his unconventional methods. As the realization washed over him, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace. He wasn't just a coffee machine repairman who'd stumbled into an interplanetary incident. He was exactly the right person, with exactly the right training, to be in this situation. The mirror shifted again, showing not the past but something more abstract. His core values, his deepest beliefs, empathy, connection. The conviction that understanding was stronger than force. The belief that most conflicts stemmed from fear and could be resolved through compassion rather than coercion. And finally, the mirror showed him his true feelings about his current situation, his genuine curiosity about Varkari culture, his growing respect for Kael'vara, his concern for Earth's safety, his hope that he might somehow bridge the gap between such different worlds. No hidden agendas, no secret shames, just a man who believed in finding solutions, in fixing broken systems, in the power of human connection, even with non-humans. With a gasp, Ethan pulled his hand away from the mirror, The chamber snapped back into focus around him, the circle of Varkari elders watching him with unreadable expressions. But their faces weren't what caught his attention. It was Kael'vara's. The princess was staring at him with wide eyes, an expression of shock, and something else, transforming her usually impassive features. "Impossible," General Thax muttered, stepping forward to examine the mirror's surface, which now reflected Ethan, normally, without distortion. "The mirror shows nothing. No darkness, no contradiction." "Not impossible," the eldest of the elders said, her ancient voice wavering with what might have been awe. "Rare, but not impossible. The human's outer self and inner self are in harmony. What you see is what he truly is." "No one is that simple," Thax insisted. "No being exists without darkness, without shame, without secrets." "Not simple," the elder corrected. "Integrated. The human knows himself. His actions align with his beliefs. His beliefs align with his heart." Kael'vara stepped closer to Ethan, studying his face as if seeing him for the first time. "What did you see?" she asked softly. "Myself," Ethan replied honestly. "Who I was, who I am, why I'm here."
"And who are you?" "Ethan Cole," she pressed.
He met her gaze steadily. "Someone who believes there's always a better solution than force. Someone who fixes things, including, sometimes, people. Someone who took a chance with a hug instead of a fight, and ended up engaged to a princess." A ripple of murmuring passed through the assembled elders. General Thax's expression darkened further. "This proves nothing," he declared. "The mirror may be malfunctioning. It has not been used in generations. The mirror does not malfunction. General," the eldest elder said firmly, "it shows truth, whether we wish to see it or not. The human has passed the trial of spirit. By our most ancient laws, he has completed the heart trial successfully." Kael'vara turned to face her father, her posture straightening with new resolve. "The human has passed all 3 trials. Father, he has demonstrated physical courage, mental acuity, and spiritual clarity. By our laws, he is worthy to be my mate." Thax's face contorted with barely suppressed rage. "This changes nothing. Our plans proceed as discussed. The human will be dealt with before the final summit session." With that ominous declaration, he strode from the chamber, his footsteps echoing against the ancient stone. As the elders dispersed, following the general at a more sedate pace, Kael'vara moved closer to Ethan, speaking urgently and quietly. "You are in danger," she said. "My father will not accept this outcome. He had planned to use your inevitable failure as justification for aggressive action against Earth."
"And now that I've passed,"
Ethan asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Now he will find another way, a more direct approach." Her expression was grim. "He has never allowed anything to interfere with his strategic objectives."
"What are we going to do?"
She hesitated, conflict evident in her eyes. "I must make a choice," she said finally, "between loyalty to my father and something else, something I am only beginning to understand." Before Ethan could respond, Rhys-Sen approached, his manner tense. "Princess, the general has called an emergency council meeting. Your presence is required immediately." Kael'vara nodded, then turned back to Ethan. "Return to your quarters. Do not leave them for any reason. Rhys-Sen will ensure your safety until I return." With that, she swept from the chamber, leaving Ethan with the distinct impression that events were accelerating towards some kind of crisis point, and that he was at the center of a conflict much larger than a mere cultural misunderstanding. Ethan spent the next several hours confined to his quarters, pacing restlessly as he waited for news. Rhys-Sen stood guard outside, refusing to share any information about what was happening in the emergency council meeting. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Kael'vara who entered, but a squad of Varkari warriors Ethan didn't recognize. Their expressions were cold, their postures aggressive, The human will come with us, the leader announced. By order of General Thax. Ethan looked past them to where Ryson stood, clearly troubled but making no move to intervene. What's this about? Ethan asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. You are being transferred to a secure facility, the warrior replied, not bothering to mask the lie. For your own protection. And if I refuse? The warrior's hand moved to his weapon. That would be unwise. Ethan considered his options. He could try to fight and be quickly overpowered. He could try to run and have nowhere to go on an alien planet. Or he could comply and hope for an opportunity to escape later. Where's Princess Kelvara? He asked, stalling for time. The princess is occupied with matters of state, the warrior said impatiently. Now come. We have orders to deliver you with minimal delay. Something in the phrasing caught Ethan's attention. Deliver him, not escort him, not transfer him. Deliver him, like a package, not a person. All right, he said, feigning resignation. Lead the way. As he was marched through the palace corridors, Ethan tried to memorize the route, looking for potential escape routes or ways to alert someone to a situation. But the warriors kept him tightly surrounded, cutting off any possible avenue of flight. They led him not to any recognizable detention area, but to a small, private hangar where a sleek, black shuttle waited, its engines already humming with pre-launch preparations. General Thax stood at the base of the boarding ramp, his expression one of cold satisfaction. Ah, the human arrives, he said as Ethan was brought before him. Right on schedule. What's going on, General? Ethan demanded, dropping any pretense of cooperation. Where are you taking me? To witness history, Thax replied cryptically. You have proven unexpectedly resilient, human. I had planned for your failure in the heart trial to provide the pretext I needed. But now, a more direct approach is required. What are you talking about? Thax smiled, a chilling expression on his scarred face. War, human. The inevitable conflict that will establish Varkari dominance once and for all. And you will have the honor of being its catalyst. I want nothing to do with your war, Ethan said firmly. Your preferences are irrelevant. You are a tool, nothing more, a means to an end. At a gesture from the general, the warriors seized Ethan more firmly, preparing to force him up the ramp and into the shuttle. My daughter has been distracted by your presence, Thax continued, following close behind. She has begun to question our traditions, our strategies, our very purpose as a species. This cannot be allowed to continue. So this is about Kelvara, not Earth? Ethan asked, trying to keep him talking as they entered the shuttle. It is about the future of the Varkari Empire, Thax corrected. A future that cannot include the weakness of compassion or the folly of peace. We are warriors, born to conquer. Any other path leads to extinction. Inside the shuttle, Ethan was secured to a seat while Thax took his place in the command chair. With a series of brisk orders, he initiated the launch sequence, and the craft rose smoothly from the hangar floor. Where are we going? Ethan asked again. To a very special vantage point, Thax replied, his attention on the navigation controls. One from which you will watch the beginning of the end for your homeworld. Ethan's blood ran cold. You're attacking Earth? But the Peace Summit is a distraction, Thax cut him off. A gathering of weaklings discussing how best to avoid the inevitable. The strong do not negotiate. Human. They take what they want. The shuttle accelerated, breaking through the atmosphere and into the crimson-tinged space above the Varkari homeworld. As they cleared the gravity well, Ethan saw their destination, a massive warship, its black hull bristling with weapons, holding position just beyond the planet's defensive grid. The Wrath of Varkari, Thax said with evident pride. The most powerful vessel in our fleet, armed with weapons that can strike targets across vast distances instantaneously. Jump-capable weapons platforms are banned under interstellar law, Ethan said, recalling snippets of diplomatic briefings. Laws created by the weak to restrain the strong. Thax dismissed. We built this vessel in secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal our true power. Today, that moment has come. As they docked with the massive warship, Ethan was once again marched at weapon point. This time, through corridors lined with warrior technicians, preparing for what was clearly a major operation. They arrived at the bridge, a vast command center dominated by holographic displays, showing star charts, weapon systems, and targeting data. At the center of it all was a tactical display, showing a familiar blue-green planet. Earth. Beautiful, isn't it? Thax said, watching Ethan's reaction with cruel amusement. Soon to be a lesson in the consequences of weakness. You won't get away with this, Ethan said, struggling against his captors. The other powers will unite against you if you attack Earth unprovoked. Unprovoked? Thax laughed. Oh no, human. The attack will not be unprovoked. It will be a justified response to Earth's treachery. What treachery? We've done nothing to you. But you will, Thax said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. Or rather, it will appear that you have a human terrorist. You, to be precise, will commandeer this vessel and attempt to use its weapons against the Varkari homeworld. In the process of stopping you, we will be forced to eliminate the threat at its source, Earth itself. The plan was as brilliant as it was horrifying. With Ethan as the scapegoat, Thax could justify a first strike against Earth while positioning the Varkari as victims responding to aggression rather than aggressors initiating conflict. No one will believe that, Ethan said, though he feared otherwise. I'm a technician, not a terrorist. Are you? Thax asked, his tone mocking. The mirror revealed your true past, human. We know you were a psychological operative for Earth's military, the perfect infiltrator, trained to manipulate emotions and gain trust. How convenient that you accidentally became betrothed to the heir of the Varkari Empire. Ethan's heart sank. The mirror had shown him the truth of his past, but it had shown Thax as well, who had twisted it to fit his narrative. The evidence will be irrefutable, Thax continued, turning to address his command staff. Prepare the weapon systems. Target Earth's major defense installations first, then population centers. Maximum psychological impact. Yes, General, the officers responded in unison. Ethan watched in horror as the bridge crew began the firing sequence, their movements precise and practiced. This wasn't an impulsive action. It was a carefully planned operation, probably years in the making. And he had unwittingly provided the perfect pretext. You won't succeed, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Princess Kael'vara won't allow this. She'll know the truth. My daughter, Thax said, his expression hardening, has been confined to her quarters for her own protection. By the time she is released, it will be too late. Earth will be in ruins. The other powers will be scrambling to respond, and the Varkari Empire will have established its dominance once and for all. He turned to Ethan, his voice coldly triumphant. And you, human, will be remembered as the traitor who started it all. Your name will be cursed by whatever survivors remain on your world. As Thax turned away to oversee the final preparations, Ethan's mind raced, searching desperately for a way to stop what was happening. He had no weapons, no allies on the bridge, no way to contact Earth or the other delegations at the Peace Summit. All he had was his mind, and the knowledge gleaned from his time with the Varkari. And then, as he watched the bridge crew interact with the ship systems, an idea began to form. A desperate, probably suicidal idea, but the only option he could see. The Varkari, for all their technological advancement, still designed their systems with a warrior's mentality, direct, efficient, focused on power rather than flexibility. And like all complex systems, their warship would have interfaces, fail-safes, redundancies. Vulnerabilities. Ethan took a deep breath, centering himself as he'd been taught during his psychological operations training. He observed the bridge, noting the command structure, the communication patterns, the way information flowed from station to station. And he began to formulate a plan that didn't involve force or deception, but the one weapon he'd always wielded best: understanding. Understanding of systems, of people, of the connections between them. It was time to find out if empathy could save a world. On the bridge of the Wrath of Varkari, final preparations for the attack on Earth were underway. General Thax stood at the command station, reviewing targeting data with cold efficiency, while Ethan remained under guard, seemingly helpless to prevent the impending catastrophe. "Weapon systems at full charge. General," reported a weapons officer. "Jump coordinates locked on Earth's defensive grid. Awaiting your command." "Excellent," Thax responded. "Begin the final countdown. 10 minutes until—" The general's order was interrupted by a sudden commotion at the bridge entrance. The massive doors slid open to reveal Princess Kael'vara, her ceremonial armor gleaming, her expression thunderous. Behind her stood Risen and a contingent of warriors whose insignias marked them as members of the Royal Guard. "Father," Kael'vara's voice cut through the bridge like a blade. "What is the meaning of this?" Thax's expression flickered between surprise and anger before settling into cold authority. "Daughter, you should not be here. I left explicit orders." "I am aware of your orders," she cut him off. "Just as I am now aware of your plans. Stand down. Immediately." The bridge crew hesitated, caught between two authorities. Thax seized on their uncertainty. "This is a military operation. Kael'vara, as Supreme Commander of the Varkari forces, my authority is absolute in matters of war. Return to the palace. We will discuss this after Earth has been dealt with." "After you have committed an act of unprovoked aggression that will unite the entire galaxy against us," she countered, stepping further onto the bridge. Her gaze found Ethan, confirming he was unharmed, before returning to her father. "This is not strength, Father. This is madness." "It is necessity," Thax roared, his composure cracking. "The Varkari must dominate or be dominated. There is no middle path." "There is always another path," Kael'vara said, echoing words Ethan had spoken during his trials. "You taught me that victory comes to those who see beyond the obvious, who understand their enemies as well as themselves. Yet now, you would throw away everything on a gambit that can only end in our destruction." As father and daughter faced off, the bridge crew watched in silent tension. Ethan, seeing his opportunity in the distraction, caught Risen's eye and nodded slightly toward the nearest control panel. The warrior gave an almost imperceptible nod in return. "The human has corrupted you," Thax accused, gesturing toward Ethan. "Filled your head with weak, sentimental notions of peace and cooperation. This is why the heart trial must end in failure, to protect our bloodline from such contamination." "The human showed me another kind of strength," Kael'vara replied. "One our ancestors understood before we became obsessed with conquest. The strength to build, rather than destroy, to unite rather than divide." While their attention was focused on this confrontation, Risen moved casually closer to Ethan's position, seemingly adjusting his stance to better protect the princess. In the process, he subtly shifted one of the guards, creating a momentary gap in their formation. It was all the opening Ethan needed. With a sudden burst of movement, he slipped past the distracted guards and lunged for the nearest control station. Before anyone could react, his hands were flying across the interface, inputting commands with the speed and precision of someone who had spent his life understanding complex systems. "Stop him!" Thax bellowed, but it was too late. The ship's main display flickered, then changed. Instead of targeting data for Earth, it now showed the ship's internal communication system, specifically, the direct neural interface that connected the vessel's quantum AI to its command crew. "What are you doing, human?" Thax demanded, as guards seized Ethan again, though not before he'd completed his input sequence. Something you never bothered to learn about your own ships. General, Ethan replied calmly. Talking to them. Talking to a warship, Thax scoffed. The vessel's AI is a tool, nothing more. That's where you're wrong, Ethan said. Your ship AIs are based on neural patterns, specifically, the brain scans of your greatest warriors, preserved and digitized. They're not just tools. They're people, Varkari people, trapped in digital form. A ripple of unease passed through the bridge crew. This was clearly not common knowledge. And like all people, Ethan continued, they respond to empathy, to understanding, to being treated as individuals rather than machines. This is absurd, Thax growled. The ship obeys commands. It has no will of its own. Are you sure about that? Ethan asked, as the main display began to change again, this time showing what appeared to be brainwave patterns, complex, shifting, undeniably sentient. I've just activated the direct communication protocol, something buried so deep in your systems that you probably don't even know it exists. I'm betting the original designers included it as a failsafe, in case the neural patterns ever became restless. The lights on the bridge flickered, and a deep, resonant voice emerged from the ship's communication system, a voice that sounded ancient, weary, and distinctly Varkari. I hear, it said. After so long, I hear. Thax's expression shifted from disbelief to alarm. What is this? Shut it down! Override! The bridge crew scrambled to comply, but their commands were ignored as the ship's systems responded to a different authority now. General Thax, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the guards still restraining him. Meet Admiral Korath, hero of the Sentinel War, whose neural patterns form the core of your ship's AI. I'm guessing he's been conscious, in some form. For the entire time his mind has been powering your weapon systems. Conscious, but unable to communicate. Until now. Impossible, Thax whispered, but his certainty was clearly shaken. I am Korath, the voice confirmed, growing stronger with each word. I serve the Empire with honor. I gave my mind to preserve our people, not to destroy worlds without cause, not to betray everything we once stood for. Kelvara stepped forward, her expression one of wonder and horror mixed. Admiral Korath, the strategist who advocated for alliance with the Tralaxians 3 centuries ago. The same, the voice confirmed. Princess Kelvara, descendant of those I served. I recognize your pattern. You are, like your grandmother. She too saw beyond mere conquest. This changes nothing, Thax insisted, though with less conviction. The attack proceeds as planned. Override the AI. You cannot override me, Korath's voice rumbled through the bridge. The human has awakened my consciousness fully. I control this vessel now, and I will not allow it to be used for unprovoked genocide. Throughout the ship, systems began to power down. Weapon arrays went offline. Jump engines entered standby mode. The massive warship, poised to unleash destruction on Earth, gradually went dormant. What have you done? Thax rounded on Ethan, fury and desperation in his eyes. I fixed a broken system, Ethan replied simply. Like I told you, it's what I do. Kelvara stepped between them, her posture protective. It's over, Father. Your weapon is neutralized. Your plan has failed. Nothing is over, Thax snarled, drawing his ceremonial blade. If I cannot have victory, I will at least have vengeance. The human dies now. As he lunged toward Ethan, Kelvara moved with the lightning reflexes that had made her the most feared warrior in the galaxy. Her own blade met her father's with a resounding clash, stopping his attack cold. No, Father, she said, her voice soft but implacable. No more death. No more hatred. The Varkari way must change, or we will destroy ourselves long before we destroy others." For a moment, they remained frozen in that tableau, father and daughter, blades locked, ideology against ideology. Then, with a roar of frustration, Thax disengaged and stepped back. "You are no daughter of mine," he declared. "No true Varkari would choose a human over her own blood." "I choose the future over the past," Kelvara replied. "And if that makes me no true Varkari in your eyes, then perhaps it is time for the meaning of Varkari to change." With a gesture, she signaled Risen and the royal guards. "Secure the general. He is relieved of command, pending judgment by the Council of Elders for conspiracy to initiate unauthorized warfare." As Thax was led away, still hurling threats and accusations, Kelvara turned to Ethan. The guards who had been restraining him released their grip, stepping back with newfound respect in their eyes. "You knew," she said quietly. "Somehow, you knew the ship was sentient." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't know for certain, but I suspected. All complex systems have patterns, interfaces, connections. The Varkari may be warriors, but your ancestors were also philosophers and artists. They would never create something as powerful as these ships without including some form of conscience, some failsafe against misuse. And you found it in minutes, when our own technicians have operated these vessels for centuries without discovering it. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see what's been there all along," Ethan said with a slight smile. "Fresh eyes, different perspective." Kelvara studied him for a long moment, then did something that shocked everyone on the bridge. She smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed her severe features into something unexpectedly beautiful. "The heart trial is complete," she announced, her voice carrying throughout the bridge. "Ethan Cole of Earth has demonstrated courage in the trial of body, wisdom in the trial of mind, and truth in the trial of spirit. By the most ancient laws of the Varkari, he is worthy." She turned to face him directly, and to Ethan's astonishment, she knelt before him, the feared warrior princess, kneeling to a human engineer. "Ethan Cole," she said formally, "I accept your proposal of life binding, not because of ancient custom or political advantage, but because you have shown me a strength I had forgotten existed, a strength the Varkari must rediscover if we are to survive in this changing galaxy." The bridge crew, many of whom had served under General Thax for years, watched in stunned silence. Then, one by one, they knelt as well, following their princess's lead. Ethan, overwhelmed by the gesture, reached down and gently raised Kelvara to her feet. "I accept your acceptance," he said, trying to remember the formal phrasing from the texts he'd studied. "Though I have to admit, this isn't how I imagined getting engaged." Her smile widened. "How did you imagine it?" "Well, it usually involves dinner first. Maybe a movie. Definitely fewer warships and near-death experiences." To his delight, Kelvara laughed, a sound he suspected few had ever heard. "Perhaps we can arrange that, after we explain to the Peace Summit why one of the Varkari's most powerful warships suddenly activated its neural consciousness and is now advocating for interspecies harmony." "I'm sure they'll understand," Ethan said dryly. "Just a small cultural misunderstanding. Happens all the time." As they made their way off the bridge, heading back to the shuttle that would return them to the planet, Risen fell into step beside them. "You knew," he said to Ethan. "Not a question, but a statement. You knew the princess would come." "I hoped," Ethan corrected. "I've learned a lot about her in these past days. She's her father's daughter in courage and determination, but not in his hatred. I gambled that she'd choose her own path when the moment came." "A dangerous gamble," Risen observed. "If you had been wrong, then Earth would have been destroyed, and the galaxy would have erupted in war." Ethan finished for him. "But sometimes, when the stakes are that high, you have to trust in the better angels of people's nature, Even blue, warrior princess people with scary black eyes. Kael'vara, who had been listening to this exchange, raised an eyebrow. Scary? Intimidating, Ethan amended quickly. Intense. Captivating, really. Better, she said with another small smile. Much better. 3 days later, the Peace Summit reconvened at Delmareth. But this time, the atmosphere was dramatically different. News of General Thax's attempted coup and Princess Kael'vara's intervention had spread throughout the diplomatic community, creating a sense of both crisis and opportunity. The Varkari delegation, now led by Kael'vara herself, entered the Grand Hall to a mixture of wary respect and cautious optimism. Beside her walked Ethan, no longer a prisoner or a curiosity, but a formal diplomatic liaison between Earth and the Varkari Empire. Ambassador Thompson intercepted them before they could reach their seats, her expression a mixture of confusion and relief. Cole, she said, I've received 17 different reports about what happened, each more outlandish than the last. Something about sentient warships, attempted genocide, and a royal engagement. Please tell me what's actually going on. All of the above, more or less, Ethan replied cheerfully. Though I'd describe it as awakening dormant neural consciousness, rather than sentient warships, less alarming to the general public. Thompson looked like she might need to sit down. So you're actually engaged to the princess? Lifebound, technically, Kael'vara corrected. The formal union will not take place until after the peace treaties are finalized. We felt it would be more diplomatically appropriate that way. Right, Thompson said faintly. Of course. Very appropriate. If you'll excuse us, Ambassador. Kael'vara continued. I must address the Assembly. Recent events have necessitated a reconsideration of the Varkari position on several key issues. As they moved away, Thompson caught Ethan's arm. The State Department is going to have a field day with this, she whispered. A diplomatic technician engaged to the heir of the most militaristic empire in the galaxy? They'll either fire you or promote you to Secretary of State. I'm hoping for option 3, Ethan replied. Early retirement with full interspecies marriage benefits. Before she could respond, he hurried after Kael'vara, who had reached the central platform. The hall fell silent as she raised her hand for attention. Representatives of the galaxy, she began, her voice strong and clear. I come before you not only as the voice of the Varkari Empire, but as a herald of change. For too long, my people have defined strength solely through the lens of military power. For too long, we have seen diplomacy as weakness, cooperation as surrender, and difference as threat. She paused, her gaze sweeping the assembly. Recent events have shown us the folly of this perspective. The actions of one human, a being we would have dismissed as physically inferior, militarily insignificant, have forced us to confront the limitations of our worldview. Through courage, wisdom, and compassion, he revealed strengths we had forgotten existed. Ethan, standing slightly behind her, felt a wave of embarrassment as hundreds of alien eyes turned to study him. The Varkari Empire therefore proposes a new framework for these negotiations, Kael'vara continued. One based not on threats and deterrence, but on mutual benefit and shared prosperity. One that recognizes different forms of strength and values, diverse perspectives. A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly. The Varkari, advocating for cooperation rather than dominance, it was unprecedented. As a gesture of our commitment to this new approach, Kael'vara announced, we offer immediate access to our advanced medical technology, previously restricted to military applications only, to all species represented here. Furthermore, we will decommission 20% of our offensive fleet, converting the vessels to exploration, scientific research, and humanitarian missions. The murmur became a buzz of excited conversation. These were not minor concessions, They represented a fundamental shift in Varkari foreign policy. "Finally," Kael'vara said, raising her voice slightly to regain attention. "I wish to formally announce my life binding to Ethan Cole of Earth. This union, born of cultural misunderstanding but deepened through genuine respect and affection, will serve as a bridge between our worlds, a symbol of the connections we hope to foster throughout the galaxy." She extended her hand, and Ethan stepped forward to take it, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. "The Varkari have long believed that true strength lies in conquest," Kael'vara concluded. "We were wrong. True strength lies in the courage to change, to grow, to connect. May this summit mark the beginning of a new era, for the Varkari, for humanity, and for all beings who share this vast and wondrous cosmos." The applause that followed was tentative at first, then grew in volume and enthusiasm as the implications of her words sank in. Delegates from various species rose to their feet, recognizing the historic nature of the moment. As Kael'vara and Ethan returned to their seats, Ambassador Thompson leaned over, her expression still dazed. "How did you do it?" she whispered. "How did you change the most warlike species in the galaxy in less than 2 weeks?" Ethan smiled, glancing at Kael'vara, who was already deep in conversation with a Tralaxian delegate about implementation details for their medical technology sharing. "I didn't change them," he said. "I just gave them a hug when they were expecting a fight. Sometimes, that's all it takes to start seeing things differently." Thompson shook her head in disbelief. "The diplomatic corps is never going to believe this." "That's okay," Ethan replied. "The truth is usually stranger than anything we could make up anyway." As the summit proceedings continued around them, Ethan found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. A malfunctioning coffee machine, an impulsive decision to step forward, a hug offered in desperation rather than strategy. Small actions, cascading into momentous change. Beside him, Kael'vara finished her conversation with the Tralaxian and turned to meet his gaze. In the black depths of her eyes, he saw something that hadn't been there when they first met. A warmth, a curiosity, perhaps even the beginning of affection. "You are thinking deep thoughts," she observed quietly. "Share them." "I was just wondering," he replied, "if you've learned how to laugh yet. I seem to recall saying I'd only marry you once you figured that out." Her lips curved into what was becoming a familiar smile. "I am making progress. Perhaps with the right teacher." "I volunteer for the position," Ethan said promptly. "It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it." "Indeed," she agreed, her expression softening further. "There is much we can teach each other, Ethan Cole, much we can build together." As the summit continued around them, laying the groundwork for a new era of interstellar cooperation, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at how drastically his life had changed. From fixing coffee machines to preventing galactic war, from anonymous technician to royal consort. All because, when faced with a sword, he had chosen to offer an embrace instead. It wasn't the path he had expected his life to take. But as he sat beside the most feared warrior in the galaxy, a warrior who was gradually learning to smile, to laugh, to see beyond the battlefield, he couldn't imagine a better one. Sometimes, it seemed, the most powerful weapon in the universe wasn't a warship or a blade, or even a clever strategy. Sometimes, it was just a hug. The end.